Mwache kupenda mashamba sana kwa sababu yenu Mafuriko Gardens 40/80.
Did you listen to the Hot Breakfast this morning? Here's what you missed.
The last few weeks we've experienced some crazy temperatures here, and ridiculous floods, devastating loss of lives. I think it's now at 289.
And still counting.
Still counting. There was a mudslide yesterday in Kimende.
Yes.
So that some villages have been trapped under. So it's been bad, and it's all about climate change. As much as some people want to deny the fact, climate change is real.
And it's been happening consistently for the last couple of years, maybe 10, 20, 30 years, maybe even longer than Jeff has been alive, which is a long time.
That's a long time, bro. So who's doing anything about it? Actually, there are people out there doing something about it. It's good to see young people stepping up to the plate and saying, you know what, we need to do stuff. Because a couple of years ago, there was drought. Right, a few years ago, drought declared across the country, and now floods in a span of 4 years or so? So Reuben Wambui is the founder of Kenya Climate Directory. What is that about? Well, it's all about pushing for climate change and financing for a better tomorrow.
And he's in the studio.
Reuben joins us live in the studio. Welcome, Reuben.
Thank you.
Explain to us what climate change is, just for Peter Salasia to...
So climate change is how the environment has been changing over time and weather patterns. So, and the best example, if you want to think about climate change, is to think about rainfall and temperature. So if your rainfall, say, used to be a particular level in a place, and then over time, the average rainfall has changed, by a certain limit, then it means these are climate changes. And the same way for temperature, how people say, maybe, growing up, maybe our place wasn't this cold, and over time it has gotten colder, or it has gotten warmer. Then that change in weather patterns over a very period of time, and it persists for quite a while, is what would say is climate change in layman's language, so that we are able to reach a huge audience to understand climate change.
Absolutely. And it's been happening the last few years. Why more frequently than before?
One is the frequency, and also how severe it gets. Because we used to have, floods years ago, but people say even if it flooded, it didn't flood this much. Remember in the 90s we had El Nino, and I was talking to Mzee in Kiambu who told me even during El Nino, where he lives, he doesn't remember experiencing this kind of flooding in his farm, even during the El Nino period. I think the reason it's changing is because, with climate change, a lot of it is because most people have heard about greenhouse gases. So CO2, in school we used to say this carbon dioxide. It goes into the atmosphere. And what has happened over time, there has been just a lot of greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. And what that does, it traps a lot of the radiation that comes from the sun. Because realize, when the sun rays come and there's all this radiation, it's reflected back. But the more we have had more emissions, and I'm trying to keep it very simple.
Even simplify it more, if you can.
Yes, the more we've had, we have had more, gases into the atmosphere because of all this industrialization and all this manufacturing and farming and all this activity. What this means, all these rays, coming from the sun, they're usually reflected back. But the more we have a huge layer of emissions in the environment, it means a lot of these rays, instead of getting reflected back to the sun, they get trapped within the atmosphere. It's the whole concept of a greenhouse. You see, when you put a greenhouse, and then it's like you're controlling just how much, sunlight your crops can get. So over time, there's been more trapping on this, and what has happened, just simply, is that with climate change, the Earth atmosphere has gotten warmer.
Right.
Yes.
And the Earth has become warmer, I think by 2 degrees or something, right?
Yes.
And it's dangerous. I mean,
we are not yet at 2 degrees. The aim is not to cross 2 degrees by the end of this century, which is 2100. If we will.
And Jeff will be there live to report, by the way,
at the Antarctic Ocean.
At what point will it be considered too dangerous, or maybe the world ends. Let's speak like guys who go to church. Is there a point where it gets to hatuwezi kuishi kwa hii dunia anymore?
Yes, it is. We just need to have climate conditions which enable human life, which we call habitable. Because tumefika hapo, Nick, there are some people where they live right now, they can't live because of the landslides that have happened and the flooding. They've already been displaced. So for them, that point has already reached. So, and scientists have a good name for these things, what you're asking, inaweza fika hapo. They're called planetary boundaries.
That's a nice name.
Yes. So the planetary boundaries is saying, these are the limits which we need to have the climate being at for human life to be habitable or for human life to exist. So of course, if things get hotter, mambo yakichemka, then it becomes very, very difficult. But that reality is already there, especially for, even Kenya, we are a bit lucky. There are people who live in
really hot places.
Really hot places, and some also they live in small island states. Countries like Barbados and all these small islands. For them, with the high temperature, it means the rising sea water displaces them because they live in island countries. Yeah, so for them it's even much riskier, and their planetary boundaries are a bit more stretched.
And even those cities that are on coastlines, they're threatened as well in some places, right?
Including our own coastline. Yeah, because you see, we've been having news there might be a cyclone Hidaya. Of course, because of Kenya, we are blessed, we are on the equator. But then, Nick, last week I was in Nanyuki, and I took the advantage to take another photo at that equator thing.
Yes. Like all Kenyans.
Like all Kenyans. I am as Kenyan as they come. And because we are within 5 degrees on the equator, because the equator is at the 0, yeah? So just because Kenya is within that limit of 5 above and 5 below, that is what has saved us from Cyclone Hidaya. Because how the cyclone works, it can't really persist. The storm of the cyclone cannot really persist within 5 degrees of the equator. So it means if that cyclone had come to this region and we were outside being equator based, it will have hit us very hard. Because you can see the effects, at least in Tanzania, are going to persist much more.
Tanzania was really bad.
Yeah, because they are lower than us, so they are lower than within the latitudes. And
so what saved us was the equator.
Our geographic, just where we are located, Kenya, where Kenya is located on the map.
This is just something that God did. I mean, He can't give us all these taxes and then plus high cyclones, Carbon credits and all these carbon emissions and all these things that we even have conferences about.
Yeah.
What is carbon credit and
how do we gain from that?
Yeah.
So you have Jeff and Nick. Sijui nani anakunywa maji kuliko mwingine.
Huyu anapenda maji sana.
Nick. And we mean actual maji.
Yeah, maji.
Okay, sawa.
Si ile maji ingine la yellow.
Ile ya yellow na ina ka froth juu yake.
Anielewa. So you want a carbon credits,
Yeah.
Nick, assuming you have a very huge thirst for water and you're consuming, and so I give you every day 10 liters. So I tell you, Nick, you can drink 10. Jeff, you can drink 10. But Nick, his thirst, he's doing 15. So he's taking 5 more. Okay. Which means if you do your 10, both of you will be doing 25. But maybe the source of water can only support 20. 10, right?
Right.
So what carbon credits are, and I'm going to move from the water example to carbon so that, we all understand. So what happens is, Nick, I tell you, okay, because you're consuming 15, you're going to pay Jeff out of his 10, because his dust is not as high, to be only consuming 5. So that you combined, you're still within your 20. So you're paying him to offset the fact that you're
really thirsty.
You're really thirsty.
Yeah.
So that's the thing about carbon credits. Some countries in the world, they are, we have what in the world we call a carbon budget. How much CO2 or greenhouse gas emissions we can emit and still be within these planetary boundaries. But some countries are very much industrialized, and so they are really emitting a lot, and it's putting us at risk of exhausting our carbon budget. So what they do, they will pay a developing country and say, you guys, you have a lot of forest, you have a lot of ocean that can absorb CO2. We are going to pay you to cater for the fact that we are producing more emissions than we should be doing, which is the example I gave about water. You're paying someone so that they emit less to cater for the fact that you are emitting more.
Are they paying us?
So that is what carbon trading is about. Yeah, so when you see a manufacturer in Kenya making like cook stoves, and I'm a big proponent of cook stove because they have huge health benefits, especially for women in rural areas. So if you see someone producing cook stoves, they are earning carbon credits for it, because someone is saying, by producing your cook stoves, you're reducing the emissions that you could be emitting in the country. Because someone, and the person paying for it is because in their own business, they are emitting so many emissions. So they are paying you to stay at low emissions to cater for their high emissions. But what we would want more overall is not people trading to emit. We want them to be able to reduce their emissions, because that is going to be the long-term solution.
Now, Jeff, being from central Kenya, has heard that there's an opportunity to make money from carbon trading. How can an ordinary person take advantage? Asking on behalf of Jeff and the whole of Kiambu.
Kiambu County.
Look for an industry that they are emitting their emissions. They are emitting, a lot of these greenhouse gases, and then from him planting these trees, he gets paid because he's helping. You know why people talk about trees? Some people don't understand the connection. It's because trees, they are called a carbon sink. Anything that takes easy emission from the atmosphere, we call it a carbon sink. Because when people are emitting, what absorbs all that gas? Mostly it's forests, because plants use CO2. And oceans. So oceans and forests are the biggest carbon sinks. So that's why you see a lot of this carbon trading is for people who are doing things around forestation and around planting of trees, because the more they are planting and restoring, forest, then there's all these gases and CO2 that are being absorbed from the atmosphere. So that's the connection, because some people don't understand why trees. Where are trees coming in all this climate change equation?
It's called photosynthesis.
So what's the way forward? The next generation, what can we do to make it better?
Before we say what can we do, what is the problem you're dealing with? I think the biggest problem you're going to see with the climate change in Kenya and across the region is on food security. The food security. Because, Jeff, if someone is not being able to harvest because of drought, but also on the other side because of floods. We are a net importer of food. But now if you keep importing food, also that has implications. We put a lot of pressure on our dollar or on our shilling because of importation. Now that is my heart as an economist. Next time we need to take an economist. Now we talk the economics part. Leo tunaongea climate finance. But you see, the first thing is about food security. So I think if there is a way people can get enabled to do agriculture that is not rain-fed, does not depend purely on the rain. So whether it's doing your drip irrigation, whether it's doing greenhouse farming, all this kind of agriculture that moves away from, when you're raining, depending on the rain, your strategy is hope.
Yeah.
I think we need to move away from that, because with the future of this country for food security, just depending on rain-fed agriculture is putting us at a lot of risk. We need a lot of controlled agriculture, especially on the rainfall side.
Dam after dam after dam, but damn.
Right, there's something wrong here.
There's some people who are telling the Nairobi governor, why are we not, I think, harvesting more of the water? And I think the response was something like, we are at capacity in terms of the dams. So the thing is, when it rains, we are at capacity, because, and then when during like the dry season, we don't have the water.
Right. So
I don't know what we're going to do. Maybe we need to ask I don't know who's the current CS for water. This is something like we need to know what is also like I don't know, I'm sure it's out there, but we need to know what is our water management or water resources management strategy.
What's the best we can all do? You, me, folks listening on the radio, what can we do other than plant trees? They keep saying,
and a tree takes forever to grow. So
by the way, let me start there for trees. We need to move away from the language of tree planting to tree farming. or tree something. And I say this because, planting is not the very essence of a tree. How you nurture it and how you actually farm it to see it grow, especially, young years in nursery, then in the first, formative years of a tree. So to ondokea tree planting, if you plant a tree, Nick, the last tree you planted, when did you go and see how it's doing?
Let's start with, when was that? Did I first plant a tree?
Hey, you need to give him
my
off.
first tree planting is in the future.
Hey, I know your boss is listening, and Nick needs off for tree planting.
I think he's talking about different trees that he's planting.
This is a family show. Uncle. Yeah.
What I'm seeing, at least, like women groups, ama chamas, unakuta wameingilia mambo ya solar. They're doing water pumping. The solar powered water pumps.
Yes.
They're doing all these kind of efforts. I think just thinking about how people can do better farming, for me, that is a soft spot. And also like energy, because if people start using more renewable energy, kuingia story ya solar, because Kenya Power sometimes inatuonesha hiki
ile mambo
ile kitu. So I think also, like, as a country, how we can move to renewable energy. I mean, that is very top of the agenda of how we think about it. And also, I'm a big proponent as we think about the transition, because now you're talking about 30-50 years from now, right? We need to take seriously the issue about electric transportation.
EV.
Yeah, EV. So Nick, on next birthday tukununulia e-bike.
Mimi sitaki hiyo kitu. Mimi nataka kitu na nguruma bwana. Mukitengeneza hiyo ndanunua.
Tesla hiyo.
Tesla ina guruma.
Like a Tesla V8.
Yeah, but
no, but I get what you're
we
saying.
We will put sound effects on your Tesla, in the guruma kama Gazla.
But also the other day they said that EV vehicles will be now subject to tax. Initially they were making it like almost tax-free, so that people can buy them. But now in the finance bill, they said they're going to put a tax on it. So that's like making 3 steps forward, then 48 backwards.
48 rules of.
This is also part of the tax policy, which I personally don't agree with on that. I think we need VAT exemptions on green things, because that's how we're going to end up with a green economy. And we need to incentivize this, because, you cannot, from my work in climate change, you cannot deal with climate change from small steps. It has to be systemic. Ni kama story ya plastics. This is the best example in terms of what you can do. When Professor Judy Wakungu was the Minister for Environment, she banned plastic bags, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, whether you like carrying plastic bags or not, it became irrelevant because they are not available when you go to the supermarket. So we need such systemic changes. A change which has nothing to do with your habit, has nothing to do with your preference. And that's why when you have such big changes that touch on everyone in the economy, that's how we are going to make a leap, because we were able to move away from at least the small plastic packing bags. Of course, we still have a lot of plastic pollution in this country, especially plastic bottles. But in terms of plastic bags, venye tu ziliondoka hivyo, then it didn't matter whether you like them or not. They were not there. And that is what we call systemic changes. Something that you do which is outside somebody's own preference or someone's own behavior for you as a consumer. And we need that kind of thing to happen in the climate space.